Yes, hello everybody, it's good to be here. Sorry for the snow I brought from the mountains. It's of course a great honor for me to speak here on this very special occasion, and it's also very nice that gold is this year's topic for you here in the relation of Columbanus. And it's good to be here also because this is a spot where these guys set out into the great wide open, so to speak, to the continent, and they took everything they had, well, the most precious things that they had with them. That means they took their ideas and their knowledge with them and their enthusiasm to the continent. And this was quite important for the continent, because on the continent there was a lot of turmoil at the time, and people were not really safe in their what is life about and these things. And the Irish enthusiasm, which was quite charismatic also, helped them to find new ways, to find new ideas how they should organize their lives. So the Irish are important for us. I'd like to start with this picture. This is in Switzerland. This is the home of my father. Is here. You see this? We still have a house here, and there is a connection to Columbanus, because Columbanus and his band, they passed probably, where is it? Here. This way on and to the pass of the Septimer Pass. When they crossed to Bobbio, they crossed the Alps to Bobbio, and they passed actually a few meters from where my father lived. And yeah, and the other thing here is we have a lake here. The lake is new, it's only 70 years old. It's a dam they built. And when you look down, there was a village down there, and it looked like this. And what we're trying to do now, what I'm trying to do now, is just to try to find out how did it look then for the Irish. How was the real world in Europe and in Ireland at that time? And this is quite hard to do. It's a long time back, and many things have been lost. Of course, we don't have the feeling really for this anymore. And so we try to, with our intellect, to try to build what was this word, what did it look like at that time. And of course, a little commercial for St Gallen. This is in the morning, I think. No, it's probably in the evening. Huh? Okay. And the cathedral, this is Baroque, of course. It's not as old as, it doesn't come from the time of St Gallen. It's Baroque, it's only 250 years old. It was the Abbey Church. The Abbey was dissolved in 1805. And since then we have government and a bishop here. And this is the library, a library with a lot of visitors. This year there will be about 170,000 visitors that come to our library. This is my plan. I would like to say a few words to Notker, the stemmer, and on Irish monks, then about wandering monks and bishops, about the Libris Gothici Scripti, a very interesting list of books, and learning Latin and writing poetry, the Bible, art, and forming society. It's quite a bit, so I have to speed up. This is Notker the Stammerer, a picture from the 11th century. He lived in the 9th century, but this is how we can imagine that he may have looked like. He was a scholar, a poet, and a writer, and also a musician. He made songs that were sung in all the churches in the European sphere, probably also in Ireland. Sequences, they were part of liturgy, and they disappeared in the 16th century when the Pope did a reform of the rituals of the Catholic Church, so the sequences were put out because they were considered medieval stuff that you need to get rid of. So, but they're beautiful poems and music, Gregorian chant. And there is an account, you don't have to read all of it, there's an account of Notker the Stemmer about Charlemagne, the life of Charles the Great. There's one real important life of Einhard, and then there is this second account of anecdotes of surrounding Charlemagne. And in the very first chapter, it's really the beginning. First we have a paragraph which is also very interesting, but I can't go into it because it's about the topic of when is the end of the world? Will the world go on? How long will it take until the judgment of God will come? But then we have this paragraph about the Scots from Ireland, the Irish monks, who came to the market somewhere in France, in Gaul, and they sold wisdom on the market. And what's interesting also that Notker writes, they saw that on the market you have to sell something, and you cannot just give it to the people, you have to sell. And this is so they cried out, here is wisdom for sale. And it wasn't just sacred wisdom, it was also secular wisdom. So the Irish had a reputation always of being very learned. And we have here a picture from the 15th century. We've seen it yesterday already with Leanne's talk. This is St. Columbanus, is the older person with a book. So the book is representing learning. And Gaul is the younger man with the halo accompanying him. What is wrong here on the picture is that they have a different tonsure. It's not, this is a Roman tonsure, they had an Irish tonsure, would go the augo ad augum, from ear to ear. Okay? So learnedness was always something that people associated with the Irish. And this is also associated with St. Gall. There is a story, a picture from the Abbey Library on the ceiling. This is St. Gall teaching the local John. There was a deacon, John, from the region, close to where Wolfgang lives, from Grabs. And Gall was teaching him for 3 years in the sacred scriptures, it says in the life of St. Gall. And 3 years, even today, is a bachelor. If you go to university, so 3 years seems to be a good length for teaching. So you learn a little bit of the things. So learnedness is also something, a characteristic of St. Gall. They also didn't just teach religious, but also secular, even though that's a bit more complicated, because for the people then, this was the same. Everything was religious in a way. So there was not what we have today. We have a separation between religion and the rest. And this was in the medieval period, actually. Everything was together. Basically everything was theology. Also, when you talked about body parts, like here. This is one of the oldest texts of writing in Irish script at all. It's the third oldest, I think. The oldest is the Catach, which is in Dublin. Then we have the Adamnan, which is in Schaffhausen in Switzerland. And this one would be the third. It's just a fragment, 5 little pieces. But it tells us a lot about, first, it's what we would today call a secular text. It's of Isidore of Sevilla, about the etymologies. It's about body parts. You see here aurum, below perhaps. You can read aurum, This is the ear. So they explain what is the ear. And we have also information about how they would write. They would use word separation. The Romans did not use word separation. You have continua, escritura continua with the Romans, so yeah, that's why it's hard to read for us. And the Irish realized that also, so they made word separation. And we have small and big letters, capital and minuscule letters. And we have paragraphs introduced by bigger letters. That means they structured the texts to be that they would be more easily understandable. It's what Parks has called the grammar of legibility. That's, you can see it right here. And the Irish are quite important in that, and they did that because they were not native speakers of Latin, so they needed a little bit of help when writing and reading. Then we have more about wandering bishops and monks. We have an account of a wandering bishop in the monastery chronicle, and this episode must have taken place around 850, so that's more than 200 years after Gaul, but it's still very early. 850, there was a bishop called Marcus from somewhere in Ireland, and he went to Rome on a pilgrimage, and on the way back he came by St Gallen, because St Gallen was known among the Irish as an Irish foundation. So it says he visited his compatriot Gaul, and he had his nephew with him, who was called Moingal, and later was called Marcellus in St Gallen, and the both of them stayed in St Gallen. And Marcus had a small library with him, and he left it to the Abbey of St Gallen. And Marcellus, his son, his nephew, Moingal, he became a very important teacher and the head of the school even in St Gallen. And this is actually the beginning of the famous, very good school of the monks in our abbey. So an Irishman is again actually at the beginning of this very important age of learning in St Gallen. We go on to the list of books. First, so there's a list here. Right, you have the Breviarium Librorum. Perhaps you can read Breviarium Librorum. So that's the list of the catalog of the library at the time. It starts with the first entry, Bibliotheca Una. Bibliotheca Una means it's a Bible in one volume. So-called full Bible, appendect. And as all these catalogs at that time, they go from the sacred to the secular. So it starts with the most sacred scripts, which is the Bible. And if you go down here, you have an entry, Item Evangelia, two Gospels, Secundum Johannem, Scotice Scripta. So they had two Gospels of John written in Irish script, and they were integrated in the normal library here. But then the librarian also found about 30 volumes of books that were hard to read probably, and they didn't incorporate anymore in the real library that was in use. And this is this separate list here of the Libri Scotice Scripti, of the books written in Irish. So it's a special list apart from the books that were normally used in the library, but they still cherished those books, so they would still keep them and made a list for them. Unfortunately, almost everything has been lost in the meantime of this. But let's see what has remained what is still here. We have 30 entries, 31 volumes of different kinds, and about more than a third is Bible, and then there is Bible commentary, so there's a lot of religious, theological stuff, something of a theological work by Augustine, but then we have 2 books on canon law, written in Irish script, so it must have been canon law as the Irish knew it. 4 books about liturgy, 4 texts about saints. Interestingly, one of them is about St Gall, something that happened in St Gall in the 9th century. That was obviously written in Irish script, so there must have been an Irishman in St Gall who took notes of this event at that time. And then we have 7 literary school texts. Just to take one of them or 2 of them, the school texts you have here, or here it is, Metrum Virgilii in volumine uno, eius glossa in altero. That means the poetry of Virgil in 1 volume, and glosses, so commentary to this meter, to these poems of Virgil. So that's probably the Aeneid of Virgil, and they had a commentary in Irish script. Quite interesting. So the Irish monks, they would also be familiar with classical literature of the Romans. There is only one item of these 31 volumes, only one volume. We are quite sure that it's still existing, and that's the one here. It's the Gospel of St John. There is 3 times mentioned that in the catalog that they have a Gospel of St John, which also is interesting that the Irish, it seems, they were quite enthusiastic about the Gospel of St John, which is a gospel that is more idealistic in a way. It's more philosophic than the other 3 Gospels, which is quite interesting. So they had 3 of them, and this is one of these that has survived. You see here St. John with the bird, and Johannes also written on the book he holds. It's not the greatest Irish art, but it's not bad either. It's a typical Irish art. And then there is a few objects we are not sure, but they may be mentioned in the catalog. They may be one of these 31 volumes or part. It's only single leaves, so most of it has really disappeared, but we have a few single leaves that may correspond to the list. And here is one. This is the letters of Paul in 1 volume. It's mentioned in the catalog, the Libris Gothici Scripti, and we have the letter of Paul with commentaries in the margins. 9th century. Then we have fragments of an Irish missal. So that's the texts that were read, used in Mass, in the rituals. And why do we know it's an Irish missal? It's Irish, really. We have here Petro et Paolo et Patrizio. Patrick is mentioned right after Peter and Paul, so this is quite an indication that it must be an Irish missal. Also the script, of course. Yes. So Patrick is mentioned along Peter and Paul. And then we have another item that is also a fragment, just 2 leaves there. It's missal. There is a number of missales mentioned in the list of books in the Libris Gothici Scripti. And here is a text in Irish script, also obviously And you may hear the word that I underlined is Lazarus. So it's a reading from the Gospel of St John about Lazarus. And so it's a mass for the dead, probably. And it could have come from a missal that was in the library. This is an interesting one. We have benedictions, so this could be also prayer books that are mentioned in the list. We have on top you see Benedictio Aquae et Salis, so it's a benediction of water and salt. So you would have a benediction on these. And below here you find Exorcizote. So that's an exorcism, a text of an exorcism, also from Ireland. What is interesting here is that we have editions, later editions, that seem to me to be, the characters are different. They are continental. That's a continental scribe who added in this part, here in the middle, some things. So probably it was used on the continent by some person at least, by one person at least, and this person made clarifications or additions to this text. There's a litany. This could also be one of the books in the list. There's another one. It's a prayer for a dying person. And what is interesting today is this is Irish here, but this seems to be continental. So this was used in St Gallen, and a monk, a priest added this, and he does gendering actually. It said, Letifica Domine animam servi tui, and then nomen. So the name, you add the name of the person, so John or whatever. Clarifica Domine animam servi tui. And then the scribe here added, instead of servum, you could also say Atzilla. This would be the female correspondent. Or you could also say serve, servus serva. So that's a female slave. And he does this correctly. Serve tue Bridget. Clarificat, and again, serve tue Bridget. It's really, we get a glimpse of how they worked concretely. And also, again, we have an Irish book is used for rituals on the continent. So we go on to learning Latin and writing poetry. This is a page from the famous Christian manuscript, one of the most interesting Irish manuscript for Irish language. There's actually, it's only a Latin grammar. This is all Latin grammar. So they would need this to learn Latin, use this. The book is probably from close to here, either, let's say, from Bangor or from Nendrum. So that's, the scholars are quite all of the same opinion, comes from this region. And this is an interesting double page, because we have here a wonderful poem, Old Irish poem. And we have here a piece of Oan. You know Oan? Huh? That's probably the most famous one, at least in our manuscripts. Okay, now let's look at these two things. we have here the poem, The Scribe in the Woods. And maybe you can just read it through. You have the Old Irish on top, and it's a really wonderful poem about a person, a monk, who is writing in the woods and feels comforted by the birds' song. Also, a sense of confidence in life. And I have, I don't know if Tim Dwyer is here. Okay, didn't make it. He lately published something about this poem. You see from this, it is really a good poem. It's not, there is a lot of back thought about it. It's, he thought something when he wrote this, and he knew how to write poetry. 7-syllable lines, alliteration, assonance, consonance, internal rhyme, end rhyme. The descriptions are simple, that means they are really pointed also. There is a room sense. The woods are a place. We have a personification. The cuckoo is like a fellow monk with a grey hood. And the cuckoo is sharing his song with the scribe. So that's an old notion that the birds are singing and sharing melody with human beings, and we sing like the birds when we sing. Blending of spirit and nature, the monk prays while the birdsong in the woods seem to comfort him. So that's a really very sophisticated and beautiful piece of poetry. And the oem is, they say, it's not all absolutely clear, but they interpret it as the exclamation of somebody who has a hangover. Later, I'm dead, I'm killed by beer, maybe. Then we have the Bible. Of course, the Irish did Bible studies. They also learned Greek. They did not speak Greek as well as the Greek themselves, but they spoke it much better than the local, the continental monks and priests in the region in Switzerland at that time. Here we have one of the best examples, also a manuscript that has survived in the library. But now the Christian, this one, are not on the list of the Libris Code. It's descriptive. So they are apart from that in the Bible. We have here the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, in Greek, with Latin interlinear translation. And we have here the story of the Good Samaritan, which is important and leads us then to the end of the things, because it's the Good Samaritan is a notion, how can we organize society in a good way. So a society we need to be to care for the people that are weak in the society, and for the sick. That's a great idea that has, this is the most important story that helps to put this into action. It is one of the best transmissions of the Greek text of the Gospels. It's number 4 in the stemma. And it was made in Bobbio. It came to St Gallen in the 9th century. And so it's a very important text also for the Greek original text of the Gospel, 4 Gospels. Then we have art. I'll just go through that. This is single pieces of art. We have a cross page. They are now, here is Saint Matthew as the evangelist and scribe. We have here very nice how he has the erasing is a knife or something to erase when he makes a mistake. And here he has the quill and the staff, the the instruments to write with. And there is a British scholar, or an American British scholar, Carol Farr. She looked at all these details, especially, I think, like the faces, how they made the faces. And she would say that this comes from the Midlands of Ireland, so from the region where Columbanus and they have come from. It's interesting, and this is the famous one, Codex 51, the Irish Gospels of St Gallen. Of course, with the Gospels we have, number one is always the Book of Kells, and then we have a group of about 10 manuscripts, which are almost all on the continent, that are like the second row. This one stands in the front of the second row, I would say. It's one of the most beautiful on the continent. We have 12 ornamented pages. Here you have 2. It's usually the beginning of the Gospels. Here is St. John again, in principio erat verbum. This is Matthew. This is a cross table in between. Then we have here Mark, Luke, again, we've seen that before, St. John. And this is interesting. At the end we have, find this, the crucifixion and the Last Judgment. This is the salvation. Christ died and he saved humanity. But then we still have a judgment. Actually, he only saved the good people. And the idea of the Last Judgment is really important in the early medieval period, because people believed that the end of the days will come soon. And then they imagined there will be a judgment like that. So this is much closer to the people living at that time, and also to the Irish missionaries at that time than today. Yes. Also here we have rests of continental script. So we can say this must have come in the 9th century to St. Gall and has then remained here in there. To end now, forming society. They would not do this just for themselves. They were trying to bring like salvation to society as a whole. So they brought ideas and they tried to educate people for a better world in a way. They were idealistic people. And there is interesting, we have a few Irish texts that have this notion of making a good society, taking for the poor and all that stuff. We know it from Adam Nahn, another Irish monk, and we have this text that is Irish, even though it's Latin. We have now a copy that was made on the continent, so you see these ideas spread on the continent, and it's the 12 abuses of the world that are a wise man without good works. This is not good. An old man without religion, that means without thinking about what happens after death. That's not good. A young person without obedience, that cannot be educated, is not good. A rich person without charity is not good. A woman without modesty, well, that's a bit notorical. A master without valor, a strident Christian, that's interesting. If you overdo it as a Christian, that's not good either. A proud pauper, if you receive and you're not thankful for it. An unjust king, of course, a neglectful bishop, a community without order, a people without a law. So let's say 80 to 90% of this is still okay for us today. and to end now with Columbanus. This is a Baroque manuscript, and this is now really, there is, only the text is Irish in a way. The manuscript was made by the librarian of St Gallen in the Baroque period in 1611 probably. It's a copy from a manuscript that was in Bobbio and still existed in 1611, and Jodocus Metzler took a copy of it. And this was the letters of Columbanus. In the meantime, the manuscript, the old manuscript that he copied it from, is lost. So we have here actually now the best handwritten tradition of the letters of Columbanus that he wrote to various popes. And among these letters we have this famous one here to Gregory the Great, the Pope, in around 600. And I have it here in Latin. He addresses the Pope to our Holy Lord and Father in Christ, finest jewel of the Roman Church. Well. So, most august flower, as it were, in all this wilting Europe. Excellent bishop, practiced in meditation and so on. I, a wretched dove, send greetings in Christ. Columba means dove in Latin. But what is interesting for European history is that it's the first time, the earliest reference we have in writing to Europe as a cultural unity. And for Columbanus, Europe is the Christian region, where the Pope is actually the identity of this new Europe. Of course, Ireland also belongs to Europe in this notion. So that's very important even for today. And Robert Schuman, one of the founding fathers of the European Union, referred to this text when he made his initiative back in the 50s, in the early 50s. Yes, that's all I wanted to tell you about the treasure chest we have in St Gallen. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, just ask me. Thank you.